far as the human and animal world is concerned. The presenter is Dr. Tom Webster. He has a PhD in entomology from the University of California at Davis, and I believe that is a field that deals with what we generically call non-special school bugs. He'll tell you about that. He is now in the land grant program at KSU, 50% a researcher and 50% specialist in extension dealing with apiculture. He focuses on honeybees. He's done extensive research, including research in places throughout the world, such as Belize and Ecuador. He is now involved in a U.S. Department of Agriculture program that is studying the colony collapse disorder that is rampant throughout the world. I could add just a couple anecdotal remarks about our guest. I've had lunch with him many times throughout the years. He's very interested in philosophy. I know many of the students in here have recently read Plato, and I was tempted to have the title of this lecture as The Being of Bees. Perhaps it should be a better title, The Well-Being of Bees. The second anecdotal remark, he has a series of beehives that at one time were on my property, the KSU beehives. They are now located in my neighbor's property. I mow the lawn in my neighbor's yard, and once I was stung by a bee, and I claimed it was a KSU bee, and he showed that he's a true scientist. He demanded verification. He said, were those bees green with green and gold? And I couldn't say yes, so we're not sure. So, Tom Webster.
Thank you. Why don't you wrap up with some of that theme about KSUBs at the very end? So that's a good introduction. Is this on here?
We can hear you.
First about beekeeping. Okay, so we sort of set this in a human perspective. We're talking about one beekeeper who lives in Pennsylvania. He and I have talked many times about his particular beekeeping interests and concerns, and this is what we call a commercial beekeeper. Not somebody with a few hives in a backyard. This is somebody who has thousands and thousands of hives. His whole income, his entire income is from these honeybees. And specifically, it's not in making honey, but it's in renting his hives for the pollination of his crops. Some people, when they think about bees, they think only about honey as being the income from bees, but actually that's a very small fraction of what the economic value of bees comes down to. In fact, many beekeepers get their entire paycheck from pollination fees, which means they move their bees to an orchard or a row crop, and they rent their bees to that particular farmer for a certain number of dollars per hive, and you have a contract. And they collect money, and then when that bloom period is over, when that crop is done blooming, the bees are moved out of that crop to another crop or the opposite, another location where they can make some honey sometimes. So this is about a beekeeper whose income comes from crop pollination, and he actually loads up trucks. These are the big trucks, big flatbed trucks with 18 wheels, and you can load hundreds of hives in the back of that truck, and we've got quite a few trucks. And he typically every February or January moves his beehives from Pennsylvania to California to pollinate almond trees in California. And he gets a pretty good fee for that. Right now the going fee is over $100 per hive to pollinate almonds. And every year between the middle of February and the middle of March there are close to 1 million beehives in California almond trees in the Central Valley of California. In fact, it's estimated that during that time period, more than half of all the beehives in the entire United States are in an almond orchard pollinating those trees. So there's a lot of money involved, something on the order of 1 million acres, and the acreage is increasing just in almonds alone. And then after that, many of the beekeepers move on to pollinate other crops, certain orchard crops, fruit crops. Some will pollinate alfalfa for seed production in the summer. And that seed is in turn sold to places like Kentucky where alfalfa is grown. For example, our horses and our cattle in Kentucky are grown up from seed. The alfalfa for those animals is grown up from seed that's produced in California. some of the other western states. And honeybees play a role in that. So we have the bees tying into many different commodities here. And when we think about our own beef products and dairy products, we have to remember that honeybees do play a role here, largely because of the alfalfa pollinating role that they can. So this particular beekeeper has this business. He moves his bees all around the country, and he hires people to drive the bees because this is a long trip, and you don't spend a lot of time idling at motels for the night when you have a bunch full of bees. You just keep going. So the drivers can trade off and you go all the way. And if you're lucky, you don't have any problems, and you get there, you unload the hives, and a month later in March, you load them up and you move on to another location. So that's part of this picture, and many other beekeepers do the same thing. And a few years ago, he was moving 3 large truckloads of bees to the almond orchards every year, and then a year later, he lost a lot of his plants. He was down to 2 truckloads, and then more recently, he was down to 1 truckload. So his income has decreased tremendously because that's an awful lot of bees and an awful lot of population. And he's been contacting me because we here at KSU study a disease that has been affecting his bees that seems to be related to some of his losses. So that's just sort of a human picture right there. And he and many other beekeepers are in the same boat. They're losing lots and lots of bees, and that in turn leads to a huge loss of income, and also an increase in prices for a lot of these bee-related crops. So we talk about honeybee colony collapse. That's in one part of the picture. Okay, there's one particular microbe, and I'll talk about this to a certain extent. We'll talk about some of the other problems. And if you look at the commercial beekeepers, it's very different than the hobby guys who have a few bees in their backyard, or the middle-sized beekeepers who might have 20 or 30 or 50 hives in various places, maybe on their own farm, maybe on neighbor's property. But the big beekeepers are taking their hives apart, putting them together, and have something like this where there are lots and lots of boxes, lots and lots of bees. Maybe making splits. In other words, one hive is divided into 2. In some cases, they might be uniting bees, being hives together to make one stronger hive. And it's a big job. And of course, you can see they're all suited up here with their gloves and everything. Because there are thousands of bees in the air, and if they're getting some mutation, you know they are suited up. And if you look at this, each one of these boxes has 10 rectangular frames sitting down into it. Those frames hold the honey, and they store pollen and developing bees, which are called brood, and the bees themselves. And they can manipulate these hives by moving boxes around, and moving frames out of one box and into another box, so that they can change the makeup of the hive. So it's very manipulative sort of thing, and the bees are essentially quite human, sort of like a commodity. And this has been, in the short run, this has been economical, but in the long run, there have been a number of problems that have come up that are related to the way commercial beekeepers treat their hives. And if you think about these bees being cooped up inside their hives going all the way across the country, that comes from the east coast to the west coast and then back, you can imagine that they are going to be stressed to a certain extent. They can't get out and fly. They are likely to overheat if the weather's too hot. There's a lot of things that can happen here. And for these, they're going long distances. There are some beekeepers who will move the same hives 5 or 6 times a year to different crops around the country. So this is a fairly complex operation, and you get the bees stacked up like this. These are actually, there's 1, 2, 3 hives, and then 3 more on the back of this pallet, and then there's another 6 down here. So these 2 pallets hold 12 hives. These then are moved around, usually on forklifts. And they have to go a long distance on a truck. They will put a big screen netting over the hives so that bees can escape, and of course the bee hives are tied down very securely so that you don't have bees falling off the truck. And this is what it looks like in an almond orchard, usually, let's say, early March, when the bloom is finishing up and the flowers start falling down. I've spent quite a bit of time